I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about how to release generational trauma as you prepare for parenting. This can be obviously a heavier episode, but really, we're working on, if you're dealing with low AMH or high FSH, we're working on the physiological or the biochemical side of things, from gut infections to food sensitivities to thyroid dysfunction, blood sugar imbalance. Also, equally important to work on our stress, work on the mental emotional piece. That then helps us get out of the fight or flight into the parasympathetic, knowing that the body is safe for procreation. So we can't skip this step, and working on some of the mental emotional stuff can be uncomfortable. But as you start to open up some of the conversations with your partner around this, of how you see parenting differently, typically from how you are being parented, is key to helping you then work on these blocks. So excited for you to listen to today's episode. Let's go. Hey, Sam, excited to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about generational trauma and preparing for parenting. So a nice light topic to start off today's podcast with, but it is a theme that we see with the couples in our couples coaching program. The trauma, and then we don't even know there's trauma. And then, so how do we, if we don't know about it, how do we even release it? And how is that impacting our health? And we look at the biochemical, from a thyroid to your blood sugar to food sensitivities, gut infections, parasites, and then also the mental emotional side of things. Our coaches are trained in heart math. So Sam's trained in heart math, which really helps you get out of that fight or flight into the parasympathetic. And really, then we help you, identify some of these things that could be, impacting your stress. We'll also do adrenal testing. A lot of times we'll see the adrenals like flatline because people have been dealing with things, in their family for years. And there's a lot of, forget about being on the fertility journey alone, then also all the other things you're dealing in life. So it can be some heavy stuff that you're working through. So we do have a team where we do have a referral network referring out to therapy, to EMDR, to EFT, so emotional freedom technique, and intimacy coaching and more. So we do believe in a cross-functional team to really help it, because I don't believe one practitioner is the be all and end all. But so today we're just going to go through kind of what we're seeing, sort of some themes, and talk about how we can start to identify what's going on with some of this, how you've been parented, because maybe we just, you end up selecting a partner similar to how you've grown up. And next thing you know, you said you'd never repeat the pattern, and there you are again. And then how does this look like for your children? Sam, what's your take?
Yeah, this is just such a recurring topic that we've seen. There's been 2 recent pregnancies actually that happened very shortly after unleashing some of these, sometimes subconscious relationships or experiences with parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. It doesn't have to just be one, direct, mom or dad. It could be any parental role in your life. But we've seen it time and time again where they've either set a really strong boundary and gotten pregnant, or they've had a really difficult conversation either with their parents or their partner about how they actually want to navigate parenthood, that unleashes so much trauma and also releases so much built up fear in your body that allows you to finally be open to the idea, consciously and subconsciously, of becoming a parent. And so, although, like you said, Sarah, you might not know that this is a trauma response in your body, when you actually start having conversations with your partner, not just about what's going on this baby registry or what color you're painting the nursery, but like, how was our experience being parented? What was great? What do we not want to repeat? What do we want to leave behind? What we want to do differently? Like, starting to have those real conversations, which can be really uncomfortable, really sticky. Like you said, you might not know like what your experience was, because maybe you've never sat down and thought about it.
Yeah. So sometimes we're like, oh, wow, I really liked this part of growing up. These are some positives. Or there's other pieces where like, I definitely don't want to repeat it. And then, yeah, so how do we open up that conversation right now with your partner as we prepare for our pregnancy success? and we open up the space, prepare our space right now for our baby to, to join us. What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, I think a really great place to start is to really think deeply at your childhood. And you can start this maybe on your own with a journal, or actually, a walk and talk is a really great experience with your partner. So like when you're walking next to each other, you're not making direct eye contact and you're able to kind of process more of these deeper things. And so I highly recommend doing that. So either get it out yourself, do this walk and talk, but make this space where you can be vulnerable and start to think about like, what are those things that really stick with you from your childhood? Maybe a parental figure said something that you're like, you still remember today, just like it happened yesterday, or a certain way they disciplined, or, certain phrases they used. Like your body remembers those. So when you actually sit down and start to think about it, or you're walking and starting to think about it, bring those forward and start to unpack them, right? Like how did they act with food, right? I think that's something a lot of us feel a little bit more comfortable like talking about. Is like, how did your parents treat mealtime, right? Were you like a kid that had to finish everything on your plate? Was your parent a short order cook, right? Like it start to unpack these little things. What were they like with homework? How did they handle discipline? Think about those more challenging parts of parenthood. And do you agree with how your parents handled it? And it's not about saying your parents were right or wrong, because that doesn't help or solve anything. It's, do you want to do it differently?
Yeah, I like those ones around food. I think it's an old fashioned, I feel it's an old fashioned way. I think it's still going on, but like, you must finish everything on your plate. To me, I think that just gives people major issues with food. I remember like hiding the food underneath the plate. I'd be like, I don't want to eat those peas. I'd sit there for hours at the table. Like, Sarah, eat your food. I'm like, I don't want to. And I'd hide it underneath there. I was talking to my husband about this later. He's like, yeah, his mom, he had to eat, I don't know what it was, some sort of vegetable. And he was like, I'm not eating it. And my husband can be stubborn. And he literally, like, he was there at that table for hours. And he's like, nope, not eating it. And then she brought it out again for breakfast. I was like, oh, that's hardcore. Like, my parents were, there's boundaries, but it was never like hardcore stuff. And so the baby, yeah, I'm definitely more like that, where it's like, here's boundaries, but I'm like, oh, we don't need to be like so crazy. Like, it's interesting with the food though, piece, where I just think there's a lot of stuff around feeling. Do you think that with like finishing all your food, where the kid's like, I'm full. I don't want, but you can't be, then you can't go and have a big piece of cake and eat that. If you're full, you're full, but then it's not like, you're not full for like a dessert.
Yeah. It's a big conversations on food freedom. There's lots of research now showing that like the Clean Plate Club philosophy does not work or help anybody, right? But it is important to introduce kids to foods multiple times, because they usually won't like it for like, I think it's the first like 8 times. They won't even really like give it a chance.
Yeah,
right?
I heard it was 20, like for broccoli.
Oh yeah.
With the broccoli, here we come. It's coming again.
Yeah, exactly. And so those are like more like light things that you can start the conversation around, which like you might find more like humor and laughter in. But then like, did your parents ground you? How did they handle conflict? When you ask certain questions, how did they answer them? Right? Like those more juicy things that like you want to be on the same page with your partner about now. And it matters more than what onesie you're putting on that registry.
Yeah. I know my dad used to come out because he's like super tall with the big hand. Okay, Sarah. Smack on the butt, right? We're not doing that now. But it's interesting, yeah, where the belt would come out. Okay, the belt. And it was usually not me getting the belt. It was my brother. My brother got the belt. He got the hand. We'd all be kind of running from it. But like that kind of parenting style is like, yeah, this is in the 70s, right? This is like old fashioned, right? And so obviously we didn't do that with our children. We did the whole like naughty corner and the naughty step. And even now I'm like, well, that seems out of date for what's going on now. I'm like, here you go in the corner and you're going to the corner, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it seems like it wasn't effective. It didn't work.
Yeah. And I know that we both have, explored some of Gabor Mate's books and his different research on generational stuff like this. And again, it's not about blaming your parents. I mean, sure, some parents definitely need to own their actions and what they did. However, it's also like they did what they did with the tools that they had. And so what do you want to do with the tools that you have? And this is a great opportunity to really be on the same page of like, all right, when the kid is being dangerous, like, what are we going to do to help them learn that this is not okay? This isn't safe for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is there anything that really stuck with you, right? Obviously for me, if like my dad's hand coming after me, that stuck with me. I remember my husband always joked about his mom running around after him with the wooden spoon. That was more of a joke because she never touched anybody. But yeah, like anything that really, like my brother and dad were always fighting. I grew up with those two, like, and they haven't talked in 10 years. So there you go. And they worked together for 20 years. The whole thing blew up, and now they haven't talked to each other for years. And so, but it was kind of like this thing where the two of them were very similar. So there's a lot of throwing stuff. And so it was always those two fighting. And I was always like, see ya, I want to like get out. I never wanted to be at home. I couldn't be in the house. But now I'm like, it's getting to the point where I don't want to leave the house. I'm like, so my husband, he's like, I got to go out and do chores and doing stuff. And I'm like, I'll just stay here. And for years though, I always wanted to be the one. I'll meet you somewhere. I'll meet you. Let me like get out of here. Because I couldn't wait to leave. And so to kind of see, how those are some of the things that stick with you, and you sort of have these patterns, right? And how has that impacted you?
Yeah, there's a television show right now that's very trendy called The Bear. I don't know if you've seen it.
No,
but there's an episode showing Christmas in a family environment with someone with borderline personality disorder is what I would say it is. Of course, I'm not a therapist, but that's very much what it looks like it is. And she's also a drinker, and the chaos of that is something that like so many people experience as normal, like this loud, this yelling, this bickering back and forth, this frustration, like this just chaos. Like you might have felt that as normal in your life. I know that I grew up in a very, very loud house, and it was weird when I moved away from that and that was quiet. But now I've learned like, oh, I really like this. Like I love being in loud spaces in certain moments, like celebratory moments, but not constant. Right. And like what that does to your nervous system, what that does to, your whole body, and being able to be like, you know what, I can take that in pieces now. I can set a boundary around that and spend time with these people I love, but not do it in this harmful way to my body.
Yeah, it's interesting with the loud, because I grew up in the loud. Everyone would be like, we'd all be yelling. Kind of like if so, here's an example of like if the phone rang. This is back in the days when there was a phone attached to the landline. The phone rang. The phone would be like, you'd say it's for so and so, and you'd yell, Sarah, phone. We'd yell, and then I go to my husband's house. This is when we just started dating, and I think I might have told the story before, but so the phone rings upstairs, and then we're downstairs, and his mom comes down the 3 stories down to the basement. Greg, just to let you know, there's a phone call for you. I'm like, what? Did you just personally come down and say that? I'm like, we're not yelling. What the like this like craziness. And so I am probably more. I've kept on that some of that yelly kind of thing sometimes, but I prefer. But my husband and I, we don't fight. We get along. We've been married for like 27 years. I don't have that house. My parents never fought. It was my brother and dad fighting, and they were always yelling and throwing crap out the window, and all this stuff was always going on. I was just like, oh my God. And so it is interesting I was talking to my friend the other day, and she was like, yeah, I grew up where my parents fought all the time. My dad's clothes are always being thrown out the window. He was trying to punch the glass to get in. He was an alcoholic, all this sort of stuff. And that, how has that impacted her relationships? And and it sort of passed on, right? There's things you don't want to do, but if you haven't dealt with it and got help with it, next thing you know, you end up repeating it because it's just what you know.
Exactly. And it's important, I think, to recognize that like all trauma is trauma. So, let's not say like, big T trauma, little T trauma, like it all is trauma. So if you had anything that stuck with you all the way through adulthood, and it's something that you need to unpack and really evaluate and have conversations with your loving partner about like, how do I want to take this piece moving forward? And, some of us believe that this generational stuff goes into our bodies. And, there's a lot of research showing that our babies feel what we feel in utero. So being able to start to process that stuff now so that your child can have a more calm, peaceful environment and it be more aligned with your values and how you want to raise them, and not things that are like subconsciously in you from your past.
Yeah. So the triggers from your childhood that you don't want to bring forward, like and this is interesting. Like it's like you just end up. It's not about being perfect, right? Because there's certain things. It is about awareness, and you look to to do better, and to get help with that. So first step is, I think, as you say, like having these conversations, because most people don't even think about this stuff. It's like, okay, they might consciously know they don't want to repeat some of the stuff that happened in their childhood, but then next thing you know, they go repeating it because they haven't dealt with it. And so some of the triggers, like what are some triggers that you wanted to share there? Anything about that, that you're seeing kind of people that is impacting people?
Yeah, so I actually see a lot of this with like new parents actually, like so they do all this work to get pregnant, they have this baby, they're so excited, they think about the immediate things like, oh, like how are we managing parental leave? What are we doing like very, very early? Like the who's going to set up our meal train, right? But like what about when you're getting ready to like sleep train? Are you going to sleep train? If the baby is crying, are you doing cry it out method? Or are you going and soothing them? Like all those choices that you have to make as a couple about how you're going to raise this child. It's so much easier if you have those conversations when you're not sleep deprived and already frustrated, right? Like have these conversations ahead of time so that like this is how we would like to navigate it. So if it doesn't work that way because nobody's perfect, we're not aiming for perfect, right? But like how can we start to have these conversations now so that we're more confident in our ability to raise these babies, right? Like so many of us like struggle with our confidence when we're struggling to get pregnant because there's so many things that are not working for us. Well, this is something that you can start to control. Like, thinking about one of my favorite activities to do with couples is like, what is your ideal Saturday going to look like when you have your baby, right? And it goes beyond just like, we're going to go to the park and we're going to do this, but like, who are you spending your time with, right? Who is allowed into your space? Like, how are you waking up? What activities are important to you? What are the values of your family as a core? And these are the bigger things that allow you to like unpack these, generational traumas, prepare for the parenting of this kid. But also like, if one of you is like religious and the other isn't, how are you going to tackle that, right? If one of you is a more stern person in life and the other one's more gentle, how do you want to navigate that? Like those are just such important conversations to have with your partner before you're in the stressfulness of actually like welcoming this newborn that's going to cry and have lots of needs and stress you out and rob you of your sleep.
Yeah. So it's right now to me, it's like to work on like you as a couple to strengthen, because this journey can either pull you apart or bring you closer together. So you as a couple, I was just listening to Mel Robbins there. She was just talking about like the secret to like finding a relationship that's work is the compatibility. Do you get along? Do you like your partner? Do you guys get along? Are you on the same page? You don't need to, be completely agree about everything, but some of the bigger things, like if you're constantly, you want to do it this way and they want to do it that way, I don't know, where's the compatibility piece on that, right? So it is to be able to have the conversations now and not just make an assumption that, oh, they're going to want to do it this way. Just so happened my partner, my husband and I, yeah, we're like literally all big things. Like we're just on the same page. And we didn't really have these conversations, but I knew him for like 6 years before I got married, like got engaged to him. So it wasn't, I remember like a time going, really, am I still waiting to get, like, I was younger, but still we got married at 25, but still 6 years. It wasn't just, but that's just kind of how we are, where we're like not like fast to do these things. It's sort of, I wanted to make sure we knew each other, and I'm not going to pick a person that's, I don't know. I always say to the kids, I'm like, you should be happy I selected your dad. Like, look at this guy. Like, he's a freaking great guy. He's a nice person. He's, and
Still
so.
listen to this episode.
Pardon?
I said he needs to listen to this episode.
Exactly.
I love that.
But yeah, it's interesting kind of with that. So what interesting with me, because I'm this like planner, I love to like, out of my group of girls, I'm always the one that plans everything. And it sometimes gets to the point where I'm like, oh, how did I get into this role of planning? It's exhausting. But, and then my mom growing up, she was always like, my dad was always working, entrepreneur, always had his own business. He was off working nonstop. I guess he was workaholic. I didn't really know it at the time, but yeah, she always had his meal waiting for him in the oven when he came home, because he never sat with, like, he was always late for dinner. But she always had us doing all kinds of activities. So everything was scheduled. And I did from everything from like tennis lessons to like every kind of activity. I couldn't say I'm great at any of them, but I've tried most things. So therefore, like a new thing doesn't scare me. But so I did the same thing with my kids. I literally had them so many activities. And now I look back, I'm like, what was I doing? Like it was insane. And now I'm like, you don't need to do so many. You can just be, right? We can.
That was something that was in subconscious in you though, right? That was like a way that you were parented that was
Oh,
subconscious in your body. And so that's what you did.
yeah.
And so like this is one of those things like, when you mentioned earlier about how like you may or may not feel the same way about things, and it's like, okay, well, why do you feel that way? Like, why did Sarah as a young mom feel like she needed to put her kids in all these activities, right? Like, or like, why does someone want to do like a sports, or why does someone not want to do sports, or why does someone want to do baby led weaning versus not, or bottle fed versus nurse, like all those different choices that you make as a parent, because you make so many choices. Like, where's the root of it, especially when you're not on the same page, to be able to understand, like, where did I learn that as something I wanted or felt like I should or was supposed to do?
Yeah, like why did I have to have my kids in like camp for years? Why were they in competitive dance and all that? We spent tens of thousands of dollars on all these activities, like craziness, and private schools and all this stuff. And I look back, I'm like, what at the time? If you couldn't argue, I was hell bent that I had to do, like they needed this stuff, and if they didn't have it, blah blah blah. But really, some of that is just, well, it was my probably controlling of some sort of situation, and reenacting, I guess, what was done for me. I was exposed to a whole bunch of stuff, and I didn't even realize it, right? So not until the ripe old age of, what am I, like 52 now? But it's like, oh, you look back and go, geez, well, probably could have saved a whole bunch of money. And then it became, I was like rushing here and rushing there, and I'm taking them there, and I got the bag and the bun, the kids like, and I was like, hurry up, the whole impatience thing, right? So how does, and so it is to consciously be able to think about how you want to do things. I never, like literally, my husband and I never had this conversation beforehand. How is this going to look like? We just like rolled with it. It worked.
I think many couples can successfully do that, but what I think is really cool is when couples do start to have these conversations, like what it unlocks in them. Like I watch them get closer and closer session after session when they're able to have these aha moments of like understanding each other on a deeper level. Like when you understand, like, oh, Sarah was like this, not because she's a micromanager, because this is how her mother raised her and this is what she knows. But also you said something beautiful about like, you're able to adapt to new things a lot easier because you were exposed to a lot of new things versus someone that wasn't. And so that's such a beautiful thing to be able to recognize and have a conversation about. And like I mentioned, the couples that we work with, when they have those moments with their partner of things that they didn't quite understand before, like you watch these light bulbs of like all of these other things that go on in their relationship and their day-to-day life, that like it's just like this light path of like connections of like, oh, that's why he does that. I wonder if that's why he does this, right? And you start to understand them and you can communicate on a deeper level with them.
Yeah, because it's like many people have different childhoods, right? I feel like I had a really great childhood. I'm like back, I'm like, it was good. Even though my brother and dad were arguing, I was like, overall, I didn't think I had any problems. Not that I have any problems now, but I'm like, it's like you look back and I'm like, okay, well, maybe there was some issues there. Maybe that's why I was a little tense. Maybe that's why I probably had more anxiety than I thought I did, because there was always going to be some fighting. We'd go on family vacations. And I remember when we were in England in the Cotswolds in some little cottage my mother had rented. It was like the four of us. I think we were in our teen years, and there was a huge rifle on the mantle, like an old rifle. And my brother and dad started fighting, and one of them grabbed the damn rifle off the mantle, and all hell's breaking loose in this little cottage. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening here? So yeah, a lot of this fighting that went on. So I picked someone, I guess probably by, like, my husband and I don't fight. Like I just pick someone that's like, we don't, because I don't want that, right?
That's such a good thing to recognize. Another thing that we do that's built into our couples programming that really helps further this conversation is looking at your character strengths and looking at the character strengths of your partner, and then being able to have conversations of like, why do you have this strength? How does this strength make each other's lives better? But also, how is it going to make you a stronger co-parent for each other? Because usually this will help you recognize, big things like, oh, you have, a strength of honesty when things get tough with a newborn or, any stage of parenting. Like, I can trust that this person is going to be real with me and honest with me. And that's beautiful to recognize versus, other strengths that have awesome things too, but you're able to see like where you can meet each other and where you can collaborate together and really, balance each other out.
Yeah, we see that they're recognizing the strengths too. And it's interesting when we like coaching couples, it's one is typically a pessimist and one is the optimist. They've come together like for a reason. One could be, sometimes they're both stressed at a scale of 1 to 10, one not stressed, 10 super stressed. They could both be at a 9, both ready to blow. Typically we've got one at an 8 or 9. The other person is like same stuff. They're like, I'm at a 2. I'm feeling really good. And so that's kind of, and for generalizing here, typically the woman is more stressed and the guy is more chill. It's what we see coming in. And so it is to be, and so you've come together like that for a reason, right? So he may have like that you're a little more type A, get it done kind of person. Maybe he's more chill. I feel like I'm describing my husband and I, but like that, let's, he's always like, what stress? We're fine. But yeah, so the strengths of the other person, right? So someone that's calm or someone that's, like a problem solver or whatever it is. I think it's good to be able to recognize the strengths of the other person and actually validate them and tell them back to them. Because I don't think many times a lot of times our strengths, we just take that for granted. We're like, oh, no big deal. Isn't everybody like straightforward and direct? No. Doesn't everybody like have a sense of humor or like whatever it is? Like I married my husband because this guy made me laugh nonstop. So I'm like, okay, but some people are serious, right? So to be able to recognize that, validate that back to the person, their strengths, and then and how you complement each other.
Yeah. And being able to like feel like it feels incredible for someone you love to be able to like recognize like why your strengths make their lives better and why it'll help you be an incredible co-parent. And it'll continue to help you feel safe in your relationship and secure, which is going to help you process a lot of these deep things in your subconscious that, maybe you haven't been processing, and maybe you need to do it through talking with your partner or through therapy or EMDR therapy. Like there's a lot of things that like you're more likely to work on when you feel safe and secure, and when you're able to celebrate each other as your unique selves that you are, like that allows that to happen.
Yeah, I think it's just like you said, like the walk and talk. My husband and I like walk a couple times a day together with the dog that now has decided that she doesn't like walking anymore. And the dog is like 10 steps back on the leash. I'm like, what is going on with you? And then I know I got to bring treats for her to like encourage her to walk. And then you let her off the leash in the field, dog runs like a crazy maniac. But anyways, so we're walking together and it's like we're solving the world's problems. And that's just kind of like for years I walked with a bunch of girlfriends, and then I don't know, I think during the little hiatus there where we didn't see each other, other people as much, then my husband and I began walking more. And I think it is a nice thing where you're just talking about stuff, and sometimes it just becomes a venting thing where you just blab what's on your chest, he blabs his thing, and then we both it doesn't need to be some solution, but it can be just getting something off your chest, right? To have someone to talk to. That's how I process my thoughts. Other times, so if you're not a person that like processing your thoughts verbally and things like that, so there's the walk and talk, and then there's a journal. Sometimes people are like, oh, I gotta write about it, think about it, and then come back and look at it. I'm more like, here it is, word vomit, get it out, and then I've moved on. But I guess the different types of people, like what are you seeing there, I guess, or the different ways to do this?
Yeah. And I think it really depends on the person. I also think sometimes it's going to depend on the situation. And so we have a couple that I'm working with right now that it's been like layers of pulling back an onion, right? And so it's definitely been sometimes that they both are like, I'm going to process this out in my therapy session with my therapist, or I'm going to process that in a journal, or like, hey, I had this thought, like, let's talk it out. And so there isn't one size fits all. And there also isn't one that needs to happen all the time. Like it can change. I also think that, like you said, like you don't always have to end up with a resolution. The same thing when you start to have these conversations, like you're not going to get to all of it the first time, but what does it feel like to start having conversations about like, okay, our toddler's throwing a temper tantrum in the grocery store. How do we want to handle this? Or any other situation like, oh, we really don't want our kid to spend too much time with this one relative because of, how negative they are or whatever, right? Or what your memories of being around them was like. And so being able to have those conversations, even if they're in little snippets here and there, like it's going to allow you to feel more natural in processing those things. And so just make it a natural part of, when the feeling comes up, when the thought comes up, talk about it, move through it so it doesn't get stuck. And then you feel like you've actually made some progress. And again, that sense of security and safeness in your relationship is going going to allow you to do that more.
Yeah. Or in the grocery store. And so for me, it was, would Sarah's mommy please come to the customer service desk? My daughter's like, see you later. She's left. I'm like, where is this child? Yeah. So it is, yeah, because I think before obviously we're working with people with secondary fertility issues and also primary. And then, I think when you have, as you start, to me, whenever you started trying for your child, right, you already are a mother because you're thinking you are a parent, right? You've already got love in your heart for this child. And so there's timing, divine intervention, things like that, right? As the soul is coming in. So it is to be able to, we want like to parent yourself now, put yourself first, because when the little thing comes along, obviously it can be a stress on your relationship. It can be a stress on you. And being able to navigate that. Like I don't talk a lot about my kids on this podcast. I've obviously given a few stories and stuff here about my background just to kind of give some perspective, I guess. But like it is to give yourself some grace, I guess, as you're going through this, right? And other people all around you, there's gender reveals, and this will hit you, in your place of worship, anywhere you go, really, like families, right? You're hit with this all the time. And so it can be very painful as you're navigating this. This is some serious stuff, right? Like I was diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency at 28. Like I have both the kids with donor eggs. My daughter just told me that, Mom, I'm staying out west, not coming back. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. But yeah, and I'm like, look, I don't want you coming back. If you're going to be grumpy and cranky that I made you come back, I want you to come back because you want to come back. And she's like, I want to stay out there. I'm like, okay, it's fine. So, but it is some painful stuff that you have to go through, and people going through miscarriage and stillbirth and all that sort of stuff. So as practitioners working in this field, right, too, we have to have our own ways to actually help ourselves, because if we take on all this trauma and pain, like we're going to be of no service to anybody. And so it is to be able to take, like we share with the couples to take care of themselves. We need to walk the talk, right? It's no perfect thing over here, but I think that is put the oxygen mask on first, all that kind of that old analogy, but what's going to serve you? How do you mindfully want this to look like? I'm typically more like, let's fly by the seat of our pants and we'll just roll along. But I think to have some of these purposeful conversations can be really impactful, and it can actually have you explore some stuff that maybe you've had hidden, and and then you can see if you need to like have a therapist to work through it. Is this stuff, it's not like comfortable, but it's like it's going to seep out of you, and maybe you start having arguments with your partner if you're not addressing some of these things, right? And then when the child comes along, and then you're sleep deprived, and then you're like, and so it is now. Like the point of this conversation today is like, now is the time to have these conversations. Anything you wanted to add to that, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that like this, although it most always feels like it's just mental emotional, like our mental emotional manifests in our bodies. And so, I know that the first person I ever had this like aha moment with these big conversations of generational trauma and setting boundaries with actually mothers, because that's the most common theme we see is like the woman's relationship with their mother across like the majority of the folks we work with. And so this one particular woman had this really great breakthrough with her mom, and then like her constipation went away, right? And so it was like this really big thing, that chronic thing that she was dealing with, and we were working with her on it and changing diet, supplements, all these things. And it was literally like this moment in her body when she released this tension of needing to set this boundary with this parent, that her body was like, I'm safe now, right? I'm good now. And so it's not just about having these conversations for your mental emotional health or for like how you're going to parent this child. It's bigger than that. It's going to allow your body to feel like relaxed and safe and ready and prepared in a way that you won't be able to if you're not willing to have these conversations. It could be like stress messing with your adrenals. It could be your hormones getting out of whack because of it. It could be your digestive health. It could be a combination of all of it. But that's why this, what we do here at have fertile isn't just, pushing supplements. It's like, this is all about your mental, emotional health in combination with your physical health and how they intertwine. And these conversations can't be ignored because they are part of your health.
Exactly. And people are like, ooh, I'm going to go over here because it's a little more comfortable for us to look at all the lab tests and look at the food sensitivity testing, deal with the parasite, maybe look at your blood, balance your blood sugar. Maybe the sleep becomes a little bit more challenging for people, but looking at sleep, that becomes more comfortable. And we're like, ooh, now I got to go over here and look at generational trauma, stuff with my mom, my grandma, like all this stuff. Really? You want me to do that? I'm going to go to the supplements. So we can't skip that. And that's why we do believe in the mind, body, spirit approach. And we have the nutrition practitioner that helps you review the testing and develops the protocol. We have the fertility mindset coach that's going to help you implement it and then help you identify these stressors, call you out. Tough love. Sam is not there to be your friend. So, she is an amazing person and she will be friendly, but she is not there to be your buddy. Like, this is your coach to really call you out on your stuff, see patterns. She's very intuitive to be able to see, and our all of our coaches are, to be able to see what where are you getting in your own way? Is there self-sabotage? What are those patterns? Does the boundary piece keep coming up for you, which is the thing we talk about? I know boundaries are this big buzzword right now, but where are you letting people stomp on your boundaries? Is there, and maybe like the toxic people around you, maybe the toxic person is a family member and it could be a mom or a dad. And so it may be like, we don't need to talk to that person 3 times a day. Maybe we need to talk to that person once a week. And so we're not cutting them all out, but we set something around there that feels right for us as we transition, into our own, parenting time.
Yeah, it's about recognizing it and being able to notice, like, where is it sabotaging your life, and or where is it something that is going to be coming up as you enter parenthood. And like you said, you're already a parent if you're on this journey, and so how is it coming up for you now? A lot of the self-sabotaging things that we walk through with people, like, I love to sit there and be like, well, why do you think that? Where did that come from? Like, ask those deeper questions. And almost always it comes from some parental figure telling you something somewhere. It's, oh, I should do this. I'm supposed to do this. I need to do that. And it's like, where did you learn that? Who told you that? Right. And is this something you actually want to carry forward? Is this something that actually matters to you?
Yeah. Recognize the patterns and being able to do something about it. Really having a guide to help fast track this for you, because, when you're dealing with low AMH and high FSH, POI and DOR, we're basically told there's nothing we can do. We got to run to IVF, and IVF is going to pump you full of drugs and not work on any of this stuff. And you're still potentially well, first of all, we see people with it not working. So the emotional turmoil of that, plus all the emotionals, the mental emotional stuff that maybe you haven't dealt with. So that could seem like a lot. So it is piece by piece, not all at once, as we kind of, like you said, that peeling back the onion, doing it with your partner. It's not just about you there to get, by yourself, making all these changes, working. I can tell you, people come to see us and it's like they've done Reiki, they've done sacral therapy, they've done cupping, they've done acupuncture, they've done massage therapy, they've done all this, spiritual work, all this sort of stuff. And the male partner, who's typically quite supportive, he hasn't done anything. So, but he just may not know what he can do. And that's why we do this. Like, the partners are like an integral part. And then having each partner listen to the other person, like in a safe space here, having the partner, and sometimes it's more important for the female partner to listen to the male partner, especially if you find, as the female partner, that maybe you're talking more about things, to hear his perspective or your partner's perspective on this. And he can finally open up, because sometimes we find in partnerships that, that the other partner has to be the strong one. And that's just not the case. He or she is like equally going through this with you on the same journey, and it's impacting them in a different way. And they don't need to be strong. They need to be able to, vulnerable, to open up themselves as well.
And oftentimes the partner is someone that can help you draw the lines of connection to things and to get to the root of them, right? Like, to help you see, like, oh, well, wait, is this connected to this? Is this connected to that? And allow you to really continue to unpack it, because they're in it with you. And so they're in the day-to-day, they see your habits, they see if you're, if you're type A, if you're an anxious person, and they know your family, and they, they're probably able to see some dynamics that you may be blind to.
Any final thoughts on our topic today, Sam?
Well, a big common theme that we see, I mentioned mothers a lot, but the big common theme we see as a parents the couples that we're working with are navigating having emotionally immature parents themselves. And so there is a book that I have referred out many people to read. I highly recommend it. It's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And I think that it is a really great book to read if you want to, continue to navigate a relationship with those people in your life, but still protect yourself and protect this child you're bringing into the world, with boundaries or with conversations or learning how to navigate them. So if you start to do this work and you recognize that like, oh yeah, there is some patterns with my parents that I would like to not repeat, that could be a really great resource. Sarah, you mentioned earlier a lot of the alternative therapies like EMDR, EFT. I really encourage people that feel like this is a sticky topic for them to spend some time there and do that work now. It's going to be a lot harder to do when you're raising a human. And so take this time, this moment to parent yourselves. And if you're a spiritual person in any way, tap into the thoughts that maybe this is what your spirit baby needs you to do. Maybe the work they need you to do for them to feel safe to arrive is to process some of this unprocessed, trauma or events that you've experienced. And once you've moved through them, that your baby will come.
Right. You're listening to this podcast for a reason. You're here right now out of all the podcasts that are out there listening to this, and, take that as a sign. Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.